Hello and welcome to the Blood Reds Morning Bulletin, which is being turned to the Transfer Daily during the transfer window and in the off-season, where we're going to be discussing the latest transfer news and rounding up all the surrounding gossip around Liverpool. And obviously in the past few days, there's been one major topic around the club, and that's around Sadio Mane's potential departure. I'm joined by my fellow Liverpool.com writer David Lynch to discuss what's going around Mane. What do you know, David?
Yeah, well, I know at the moment, obviously, the news sort of broke, didn't it? The day after the Champions League final that Sadio would like to leave this summer for a new challenge. I don't think it came as a major surprise to anyone in terms of the in the preamble to the match when he was saying that he thought that he wanted to discuss his future after that and get it out of the way. But I think once a player says that, you sort of know what's coming, really, that they maybe want to seek a new challenge. And so I don't think it came as a huge surprise. But from Liverpool's perspective, they say that they hadn't had any word about that. They hadn't been informed that the player wanted to leave. So maybe they're saying a bit of a shock to them. But I suppose, I imagine they probably knew that this was coming. But yeah, Liverpool's quick to make their stance clear, really, in terms of they wouldn't be accepting a fee around 30 million euros, which is the fee that's been doing the rounds, and pretty firm on that, really. And I think that's sort of the start of the negotiating stance. And I think this is a move that everyone probably expects to get done. But I think Liverpool don't want to just roll over and allow the player to leave for a small fee, even though he's in his last year of his contract. He's still one of the top strikers in Europe, a brilliant player, and 12 months or not, you still should be getting a fairly significant fee for a player of his pedigree. So I think, it's the start of the negotiations now. I don't think either side will want it to roll on too long, but it's one where they've got some work to do, really, to reach an agreement yet.
Of course, it might not just depend on Liverpool and Bayern Munich as well, because Mane's replacement, Mane's meant to be replacing potentially Robert Lewandowski at Bayern Munich, who made his intentions pretty clear yesterday in the press conference ahead of Poland's Euro qualifiers, about where he sees his future. And but at the same time, Barcelona have a lot of financial problems. So if they are in for him, it's going to be interesting to see how they can get that deal done, because I'd imagine that depends on Bayern's ability to get Mane as well.
Yeah, I think Bayern will look at this as one where, because it's not going to be at a completely exorbitant fee, that they maybe don't have to wait for Lewandowski to seal his move, because, as you say, that possibly could be a little bit complex with Barcelona's financial problems, and reaching a deal there, they won't want to pay a lot of money. So yeah, it's that might be a more difficult deal to do. But I think Bayern will maybe look at this as one that they can get wrapped up early, possibly just because they're not in poor financial health. They've got the ability to get the player in, and then if they have to offload Lewandowski, then do that later on. And I think one thing Bayern will also be wary of is the idea that anyone else might have a look at Mane. You look at, say, maybe Real Madrid, for example, who just missed out on Kylian Mbappe. Do they think they can maybe go for a short-term solution up front? Someone, Mane is a player who's still doing it at the highest level. If a 3-year deal's on the table there, that maybe sort of closes the gap for them to wait for Mbappe, maybe, brings them to the table. So I think Bayern will be quite keen to get this wrapped up early if they can.
Yeah, and I mean that should be Liverpool's priority as well. A lot of the reporting around it has been, Liverpool don't want to sell until they find a replacement as well. So it will hinge on Liverpool being able to find the right sort of caliber of player who has what it takes to replace Mane. But it's going to be an interesting decision, isn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think for Liverpool, they've although they're saying around, they want a source of replacement before they let Mane go, I reckon they've got a very good idea of maybe 2 or 3 players that they would really want, and in what order they would want them. So some big decisions to make around there. And I suppose they'll be in the process now of speaking to players' representatives. They're really proactive about this stuff. It's so they don't get caught on the hop in situations like this. So they keep constant dialogue with players who they're interested in, and their representatives, to sort of always have a really good idea of what they would want, what the contract would look like, the length of the contract, what the club might be expecting if they were to come in with an offer, what is a realistic bid to start off with. So I think Liverpool, they're really clever about this stuff. They sort of get ahead of these issues, and so they'll already have a really good idea of what they need to do to replace Mane. And it wouldn't really be a surprise, would it, to sort of something comes up out of the blue, and Liverpool are much further along than you would imagine in getting a deal done to get a replacement in. So I imagine they'll want to get Mane wrapped up fairly early, as you say, to sort of have a bit more certainty. And then I wouldn't imagine that a replacement would be coming in too far beyond that, because the planning and the levels they go to on that, they should be ready to source a replacement quite quickly.
Absolutely. And for me, anyway, Mane is billed as a left winger traditionally. That's why he has played mostly at Liverpool. But that sort of position is already been taken up by Luis Diaz, and obviously Diogo Jota can also play there. So do you think that target could potentially be a number 9, or maybe a right winger, or where do you see potentially even an attacking midfielder, which has been the conversation after the Champions League final, how Liverpool are lacking that goal-scoring attacking midfielder. And we talked about that in the Liverpool.com podcast yesterday. So where do you see Liverpool strengthening?
Yeah, I think I'd probably be surprised if it was an out-and-out left winger now, because you look at the options that Liverpool have got there. Obviously, Luis Diaz has been so impressive since he's come in, and you think he's going to want to nail down that position. I think there's even more to come from him next season as well, once he's got a full pre-season under his belt, a little bit more understanding of the system. And even though he did phenomenally well in that second half of the season, I still think there are areas where he can improve, and he probably will, because he's a top quality player. And so you think he's got that pretty much nailed down. Jota barely played on that left-hand side for the remainder of the season because Luis Diaz was there, and because you had Sadio as an option on that left-hand side as well. So, I think Liverpool will still want to use him out there on occasion and make that an option. So, bringing someone in on the left-hand side maybe closes that off a little bit. So maybe, Liverpool will look at it and think, do we have an option who can compete with Salah on that right-hand side? Not really, not consistently. I don't think they see Harvey Elliott really as someone who's playing in the front three. You look at all of his minutes coming in midfield, I think. So you don't really have someone who's competing with Salah. And then in the centre-forward position, you lose Mane, who's ended the season there. And, Roberto Firmino, he's going to stay till the end of his contract, no doubt about that. But it doesn't look like he's going to be a regular really in the centre forward position going forward because of his age. And then, basically, I think Liverpool are going to maybe think that they either need someone in that central position or someone on the right, or they love versatile players, so maybe someone who can play in both. So it's I'd be very surprised if they get someone who is just an out-and-out left winger, because, as you say, there are other areas in that forward line that maybe need looking at. And as you mentioned, maybe they even think attacking central midfield is somewhere they could strengthen instead. It'll bring something different to the table.
Yeah, the name I was thinking, and who's obviously on the thumbnail of this video, is Cristopher Nkunku. He can sort of play in all of those positions that we talked about. But obviously the obstacle there is Leipzig have made it clear. The sporting director said that they don't want to sell this summer, so Liverpool will need to cough up a big sum to get him. And that's the same with Darwin Nunez, who's also another target. Liverpool will have to pay a lot of money if they do want him. So I suppose that is Liverpool's challenge as well, finding the right player for the right price who's also available.
Yeah, I think with Nkunku, it's an interesting one. I suppose them coming out and saying they don't want to sell is that's probably knowing what the club is like, and very much a selling club, and they build the talents up and then sell them on. That's definitely a negotiating position, and I imagine if someone come in with an acceptable bid, they'd be happy to sell. But it's interesting. There's quite a bit of talk around Nkunku possibly signing a new contract that would have a release clause in for then next season, and maybe whether he thinks that, one more season there, continuing to develop regular game time and then having a release clause, he's ready then to make the step up, whether that would be agreeable for all parties really, and whether, knowing he's got that out of a release clause coming, that would really work for everyone. So it'd be interesting to see whether he does end up signing a new deal. Darwin Nunez, an interesting option, one that I think, quite a few big clubs are looking at the moment. I think it's a difficult one with Nunez, because I think there's maybe some, he's a little bit rough around the edges in certain areas of his game, and I think a club like Liverpool, knowing what they're like in terms of how they do the transfers and how much research they do, would they maybe think this is just a step too far for him this early in his career? Would they like to wait for some of those edges to be smoothed off a little bit? It'd be an interesting one. But you've seen quite a lot of English clubs linked to him this summer. I think Newcastle United, Manchester United, quite a few others. And maybe they end up taking the punt, and they think they can smooth those edges out themselves. But yeah, with Liverpool, I don't know if it's just a little bit early for him, but it's certainly an interesting option, and I'm sure someone will go in for him this summer.
Yeah, it's going to be a fascinating summer from Liverpool's perspective, and from everyone else's perspective as well around the Premier League. It's going to be an interesting summer of investment for sure, and we're going to keep you updated, or we'll try to, at least for the most part, on these morning streams. Thanks everyone for joining me. Thanks David for joining me as well, and make sure to check out all the Liverpool.com content and Blood Red content going out today. Thank you very much, guys.